So I've had a bad run of games lately. I don't like being so relentlessly negative. One of the big reasons I'm doing Famidaily is because there's games that I feel never got a fair shake. Games that might not be the best, but there's something interesting about them, and you can find fun in them. The previous game to cross that low bar? Heracles no Echo. And before that, it was Family Jockey. So my past few weeks have been a real slog of games that turned out to be even worse than I was anticipating. And that brings me to Zombie Hunter. What I remembered of Zombie Hunter was a disappointing game, a bit confusing, and not much fun. But it was the last game standing between me, a long block of games where I think most of them are either good, or at least interesting. Now maybe it's the fact that I've been playing terrible games for weeks, but this time, I enjoyed Zombie Hunter. I wouldn't call it a great game, it's got some pretty severe flaws that we'll get into. But it also feels like one of the better attempts at action-adventure that we've seen on the Famicom so far. They might not have done it quite right, but it's a big step forward. The publisher of this game is High Score Media Work. As a game publisher, they're pretty small. They published 4 games total, only 2 on the Famicom. But they were actually a game magazine, and were embroiled in a legal battle at the time of Zombie Hunter's release that's interesting enough for a brief mention. In February 1987, they published a photograph of a pretty early game location for Dragon Quest II. Just one small part of a larger article. Dragon Quest II, of course, had been released the previous month. Enix had ordered magazine publishers not to include pictures of that area, and so Enix sued High Score. The developer Lennar is much less interesting. So far we've seen their Bird Week and Masho, so it's not like they have a great pedigree. The concept behind the game is about as simple as you can get. Dolgo, the evil final boss, has risen from his grave at the center of a deep labyrinth. Since Dolgo is sending out evil hordes everywhere, you, as the Chosen One, have to go down and stop him. To do that, you go through 6 stages of side-scrolling action. The first thing that makes Zombie Hunter different is that the fights are more like RPG encounters than action platforming. You'll walk along, some monsters will appear, and you have to defeat them all to get a chest. If the last monster escapes off the screen, then you get experience for the ones you kill, but no gold and no potential item. There are 31 of these encounters in each level, and you'll have to get a key from one of them to open the door at the end of the stage. You can backtrack as far as you like, though. Every encounter has exactly 1 item that it can drop, and it could be weapons, armor, or a consumable. The biggest problem with Zombie Hunter, though, is that the drops are kind of rare. Maybe a 10 to 20% drop rate. So yes, you'll get some items as you walk through, but if you want to make real progress in the game, you need to walk back and forth, repeating encounters until you know what kind of item it has, and possibly collecting extra things that you might need. You do level up, though, so trying to find those items also counts as grinding. Something interesting about the combat is touching enemies doesn't hurt you. It's only their projectiles. I think it gives the combat an interesting twist where you have to dodge the shot, get in close, and hit the enemy. Monsters have life bars that appear in the lower right, though if you're in the dark, you won't be able to tell what monster they are. You can still see their silhouettes though, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. For items, armor is the easiest to understand. You use it to equip it, and it makes your stats a little bit better. The number below the armor in your inventory is how strong it is. That way you don't equip a level 2 helmet if you had a level 4 helmet on. Armor pieces are relatively uncommon, and they're the most useful thing for you to grind for. There's an absolutely huge variety of weapons. You choose which item from your inventory you're using as a weapon by hitting select. Anything can be in your weapon slot, but if it's not a proper weapon, you're not going to do much damage. The standard sword is what you begin with. For this weapon, and only this weapon, the number below it is how strong it is. For the other weapons you pick up, the number is how durable it is. And those weapons will be things like fireballs, beams that trace along the ground, or bombs that you can place. I found a list of about 20 weapons, and I think I found 5 of them while I was playing. Some monsters are more vulnerable to certain weapons, but in my experience it didn't make a very big difference. The last type of items are the consumables, and for those you have to bring up the menu to use them. The number below them in the inventory is how many times you can use them. Food and potion recovers health. It's always a random amount, but in general, potions recover more health than food. They're the other item that you'll probably want to stop and grind up for. From stage 2 on, the levels are dark, and so you'll need candles for those. The numbers below the candles tick down as they're used. I didn't find the lights going out to be a real hardship, though. The last usable item I found was this hourglass, which freezes enemies in place. You have a limited number of inventory slots, but you can drop things from the menu. Or if you find a place where you can jump high off the screen, you'll go into a shop where you can sell them. Shops don't seem to be very common. I couldn't find one until the 3rd stage. If you fall off the screen, you're still not dead. You just go into a pit where you have to defeat a group of enemies. Beat them and you're just popped right back out again. If you can get into the door at the end of the stage, the boss is always this dragon. If you've been grinding for equipment, you're probably over-leveled for him, but any downward-firing weapon will make short work of him. Don't forget that you can jump on enemies' heads, so you can take advantage of that to bounce over him. Defeat the dragon, and you get your choice of what level you want to go to. The levels have different obstacles and layouts. The left door for stage 2 has these spider webs, for example, while the right door has spikes. You only have 1 life in Zombie Hunter, and that leads to the other big problem with the game. There are no continues. On the other hand, the game is timing your run, so it seems like it's challenging you to complete the game with as little grinding as possible. That game clock is also one of the weirder secrets in Zombie Hunter. Power on the system while holding down A, B start and A direction on the control pad, and you'll bring up one of 4 timer tests. You can see it count button presses for 15 seconds, or run a stopwatch. I feel like with a couple of tweaks, Zombie Hunter could have been a good game. Fixed drops on the items, for example. Maybe each enemy group would have a certain number of times you had to beat it before you got the drop. And it's too long of a game not to have a continue option. But I still had a good time with it. It's definitely a game I'd like to revisit at some point. I don't think I'd tell anyone else that they need to play it, but I've certainly played a lot worse